Good afternoon. Welcome to the last day of the College of Business's Business of Flight Week. Today, I am thrilled to welcome you to hear our last guest speakers who are joining us from IADA, the International Aircraft Dealers Association. We have Ms. Candy Spangler and Mr. Richard McEachin joining us. As just a quick reminder, if you are in a class that is giving extra credit, make sure you sign up at the end so you don't miss those points. And without further ado, I'm going to hand off to Richard.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for having us, and for all of you guys who took the time out of your day to show up today. My name is Richard McEachin. I'm an attorney. I do aviation law. I practice in Fort Lauderdale. Primarily what I do is work on purchase and sale transactions for business class jets on the business aviation side. So very little of what we work on is commercial. Also handle a handful of litigation cases, and mainly involving damage to clients' planes, repossessions, finance type agreements, and yeah, so if it doesn't fly, we don't really handle it. All we do is aviation, and primarily on the business side of it. So,
what about how'd you get here?
So how I got here. So, well, by car, no, but so I started my career, actually, I was a criminal justice major. I went to FAU and thought I was going to be a criminal defense attorney. I went to law school. I clerked for criminal judges. I did internships with the public defender's office. Thought I was going to be in criminal justice. And my first job out of law school was in Miami-Dade County for a unified family court. I did that for about a year and realized that that was absolutely not for me, because the cases that we had were kind of the worst of the worst, delinquency, dependency, divorce combinations. And so after doing that for about a year, I got a job working at a small labor and employment firm, representing primarily employees who were making very, very little money, $3 an hour, working 85 hours a week with no tips, no overtime. And so helped out on that side for a few years, and then got lucky enough to land a job in aviation. And I'm really happy. This is my place, and you guys are my people. And so I don't plan on going anywhere else.
All right, I am not afraid of a microphone. My name is Candy Spangler. I am an Embry-Riddle alumni, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. I want to, first of all, just give you all a kudos for being here at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, because I will tell you, when I was here, I'd probably be like running off campus, ready to start my weekend. So I think it shows a lot about your character and your interest in learning about business aviation or other facets of aviation. I had the pleasure of spending some time with Dr. Gibson, and I'm really happy to hear that business aviation is starting to be talked about a lot more, because when I was in school, we talked a lot about commercial aviation. We talked a lot about military aviation, and I didn't really know what business aviation was. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about how I got to where I'm at today. So I work for a company called Jet Aviva. I'm a sales director for them. I've been selling airplanes for about 14 years now. And I'll tell you, when I was coming to school here, if somebody said, you know, do you want to be in sales when you graduate? No. I was flying. I was a pilot at the time. I loved airplanes. I just knew that I had a passion for aviation and aerospace, and I wanted to go find a career in it. And I'm going to tell you about a happy little accident that that happened to me as actually probably about this time. We'll just leave it as many, many years ago. But I was working with career services, and I had job offers. I had 2 different job offers, one with Lockheed Martin, one with Avemco Insurance. And this company called NetJets, who I had never heard of, the career services called me up and said, hey, I've got an interview for you. I said, I don't know who they are. I'm going to pass. And And they said, well, listen, they pulled like 70 resumes and you're one of 8. Right? I'm thinking I should probably take this interview and just, use them for interview experience. Right? I have nothing to say no to. So I went to this interview, and they really piqued my interest. And so I got called back for a second interview in Columbus, Ohio. I am from Ohio. The last place on earth I wanted to move back to was Ohio. Has anybody visited Ohio? Oh, yeah. It's a good place to be from. So I go up for a second interview, and I am blown away at the operations. Never even heard about business aviation, didn't know what it was, did the interview, and I got a job offer. It was the lowest of the 3 offers that I had. Lucky for me, I had really good mentors in my life, one of which was a sister of mine. And when I was analyzing my options, she said, which one do you think you're going to have most fun with? And really, it came down to this really cool company in Columbus, Ohio. And if it weren't for taking that chance and kind of keeping an open mind on what I thought I wanted to do with my life and what actually happened, was a very happy accident. Because since then, I have worked at NetJets and operations. As it turned out, I'm outgoing, if you haven't figured that out. And I can talk with people. And so all of a sudden they said, why don't you start doing charter sales? Started working with a management company. I found out I enjoyed working with people, finding solutions. I was good at sales. So I did charter, I did fractional, I sold aircraft maintenance sales, and then in 2012, I took a job working in aircraft sales. And I gotta tell you, I love what I do. I enjoy showing up to my job every day, and it's because I picked the job out of college that I knew that I was gonna have the most fun with. I never knew that I'd sell airplanes today, but that is basically that path. So I guess if I were to give you some advice before we jump into transactions, is keep an open mind. You have nothing to say no to, go after everything, and you just might find the career of your dreams that you don't even know about. I guess with that, the other thing I want to mention is I love interaction. So if you guys have questions as we're talking here, please just throw your hand up and we'll call on you. Does anybody have any questions yet? All right, real talk of group. All right, so we're gonna jump into the next section here. We're gonna start off with a question. I'm gonna force you guys to talk a little bit. I apologize. Who knows what business aviation is? And it could be super vague. Just anybody have an idea what business aviation is?
Just the business transactions that are involved in, anything aviation, to make aviation happen.
So I'm going to restate it. So the business that happens in aviation. Okay. And go ahead.
So that's part of it, but it's actually a huge part of aviation that is not just the business side of it, but it's a lot of things that you wouldn't even ordinarily think of. So when people think aviation, they think Delta, they think Spirit and JetBlue, these big, huge commercial operators. But business aviation encompasses a lot more of that. So to give you an idea, we have several hundred clients at our firm that have anything from King Air all the way to a Boeing business jet. We just sold one last year that just went in for completion. And it's everything that's not commercial. And it's, a farmer who has crops that they need to be able to get to large distances over rugged terrain in the jungles to be able to get to their banana plantations. It's hospitals that need helicopters for air ambulance services. It's businessmen who need to be able to travel to Europe for meetings with clients or with supply companies. And it really is a gigantic segment of the aviation community that not a lot of people realize. Who here has heard of NBAA, the National Business Aviation Association? Have any of you guys been to the base event that they have at either Orlando or Vegas? Anyone? Yeah. So I remember the first time I walked into this convention center, and they used to house it at Orlando and Vegas because they're the only two convention centers in the country that are big enough to house this many people and this many aircraft all at once. They have a static display that has anywhere from 100 plus different aircraft that's kind of like going to a car show. You can get up in them, you can see them up close in person, you can touch them. And to put like a real face on, to me, what was numbers and words on paper, because a lot of what I do is contractual, was really cool. But I just remember walking into that conference center the first time, and I took about 150 steps into the showroom, and as far as I looked in every single direction, all I could see was aviation. It was everyone from the OEMs, the finance companies that help people get enough money to buy these very expensive pieces of equipment, insurance companies, the maintenance programs, the service centers, the pilots, the broker organization, attorneys, anybody who has anything to do with business aviation is at these events. And I just remember being blown away because, I mean, to my left, it was custom window shades and leather seats. And then right in front of me was Go-Go wireless installation. And to my right was Honeywell. And it just went on and on and on as far as I could see. And the weird thing is that nobody seemed to know about that. And it's a huge part of what we all do.
So I'm going to jump in here because I think Jack gave a different answer to the question. So just so that we're all on the same line, because I don't want him to miss what he said. We always talk about aviation business, which is the business side of everything. And I think they were asking business aviation versus commercial aviation. So when you said aviation business, that's all of it, whether it's commercial or not. You are on the money. They're looking at the other sector of it.
Yeah, so business aviation, as Richard was talking about with, for those of you that are familiar with NBAA, National Business Aviation Association, it's all encompassing, but think about general aviation that's used for business. So the US has 5,000 airports, public use airports. About 300 of those are serviced by the airlines. So that leaves a pretty big pool of the United States that if businesses, manufacturing, if they want to travel to these remote parts, it's going to be several days for them. So a CEO of an agricultural company or a manufacturing company, if they took first class on Delta, they would have to fly into a city, rent a car, drive for several hours to get to their plant that's in rural Oklahoma or wherever. So business aviation, which was really founded back like in the 1960s, was the first private business flight department. And it really gave these companies a competitive edge because now the CEO can visit the manufacturing plants in these rural towns, and it's a day trip for them. They can leave their home office, go somewhere, and then come back the same day. And they can do that with their top level managers and whatnot. So the accessibility through the use of business aviation is much greater than the airlines, and it gives them a competitive edge. So what that means today is there's like 50,000 business jets in existence today, still flying around. And one example that I have of a client of mine is a client out of Denver, Colorado, which is where I'm based. He owns several hospitals throughout the Mountain West, and they're in very small towns. And so he operates a fleet of King Airs. And he takes doctors, specialized doctors, orthopedic surgeons, oncologists, and they fly these doctors to these remote areas. So these rural areas can get access to very good specialized medicine. And then those doctors can go home every night. And so he's got all these hospitals, and that's just one example of business aviation. And I know Richard has some as well.
Yeah, and so, I mean, there's also fun uses for business aviation as well. I mean, celebrities, basketball players, Taylor Swift, Elon Musk, those types of people, they're not getting on a Spirit Airlines flight. They're not going to be sitting next to them. They have their own planes. They charter their own flights. They get to where they need to go. For some people, it's a security thing. They can't be, bombarded by fans on a public airline. And for some people, it's convenience is a big component of it. They want to be able to have the flexibility to leave when they want to leave and have the pilots on standby ready to go. And if they need to change directions mid-flight, to be able to account for that and to be able to use the asset in the best way to grow their business. And a lot of times in the media, things kind of get a little bit jumbled up, and it's like, oh, these business planes are such a big impact on the environment, and they absolutely are. But the industry's making things. I'm sure that all of you guys have heard of SAF, carbon credits, and those types of things are big in the industry as well, trying to reduce the carbon footprint that we all have in putting these aircraft into the sky. But just doing everything that needs to be done to service these aircraft, to have them flown by qualified pilots, to make sure that they're operating in a way that's in compliance with their insurance requirements and requirements with the FAA, whether it's being chartered under Part 135 or private aviation flight under Part 91, if you guys are familiar with those, that it's a big component of all this.
All right, so any questions on what business aviation is or is not, or what the advantages are? Any questions on that? You guys are good? All right, yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to selling an aircraft, obviously you have to inspect the airplane. What teams do you have in regards to maintenance when it comes to deciding whether you want to sell or acquire that aircraft?
So the question is the maintenance teams and what kind of inspections you're doing and the teams that you're going to involve when you're buying and selling an airplane. And I probably paid you $20 because that is just what we're going to segue into. So thank you for that question. So the next segment that we're going to talk about is walking you through a typical aircraft transaction and everything that's involved. And Richard and I work hand in hand with aviation attorneys all the time. I probably get involved a little bit earlier in the conversation. So I'll kick things off with kind of that discovery process, and then I'll let him take you through the really fine details.
The boring stuff.
The boring stuff, yeah, I'll hand the mic off for that. The transactional law, I coined that happy law. Because, like, let's face it, your happiest day is when you buy the boat, you buy the airplane, you buy the new car, right? Transaction law, that's happy law. So you're practicing happy law. So for my side, I work with mainly pre-owned airplanes, so not new OEMs, but that allows me to work with all different makes and models. I'm working with clients that are transitioning from their current airplane into a different one, but I also work with first-time aircraft buyers. So for me, when I'm working with a first-time aircraft buyer, and we refer to them as concept buyers because we're not really sure if they're going to pull the trigger, it's a very expensive investment. And I would liken the purchase of an airplane to buying a business. It's not like buying a house, right? So there's a lot of due diligence that we were talking about. So when I sit down with a client who is thinking about buying their first airplane, I want to make sure that they're familiar with operating a business or private jet. And so I'm asking questions like, are you chartering now? That'd be like somebody going out to buy a motorcycle having never ridden one, right? Why would you buy one until you'd at least tried one out or taken a course or something like that? So I like to make sure that they're familiar with it. Have they chartered? Maybe they've tried fractional ownership first. I want to see what their exposure is. You want to add to that or? Oh. Anyway, so then I start getting into, well, how are you going to use this airplane? Are you going from here to Tampa? Are you going from here to West Palm? Or are you looking to go to California? Well, that's a very different mission going to California versus right down the coast. The other questions I'm asking are, how many people are typically on board? If it's an executive team, believe it or not, I have to ask, like, how tall are your people? Because some of these airplanes that you sit in, not a problem for me, as you can tell. I'm not very tall. But for tall people, like in some of the citation jets, if they're tall, their head might, we call it the citation head crook, and it'll get pretty permanent if you go on longer trips. Shorter trips are fine, right? King Airs, this is kind of a funny one. A lot of guys in the crowd. I gotta tell them, like, going to a bathroom for a guy in a shorter airplane can be problematic, but they don't know that, right? You don't know what you don't know. So how many bags are you taking? Are you taking skis? Are you taking golf clubs? Are your little kids going? Because some of the airplanes have drop aisle in between the seats. Maybe the kids want to color on the floor or something like that. So we really get into the weeds on that discovery process. And then for those of you that are, pilots and in operations in the room, which really helps me in my role, is I ask questions like, what airports are you going into? Because if it's below 5,000 feet, now I need something with a straighter wing, something that's not as fast, right, but can get into short field. So you really get into, the thing that I love about my job is I get to use my piloting background. I'm married to an aircraft mechanic, so I believe that through osmosis, that makes me an aircraft mechanic as well. He would beg to differ. But it takes all of those pieces and asking a lot of questions, because in sales and in both of our jobs, we're providing solutions to a problem. And I will tell you this, the day that they invent time travel, I'm out of a job, because I am selling time. I'm selling time that they can save with their families, having a regular life, stuff like that. So understanding the mission and providing them with options. So that's step one in the transaction process. Then I get into budgetary stuff. How much are you looking to spend? There are three components that I look at on the spend side. One is your acquisition budget. One is your operating budget. You can actually buy an older jet for pretty cheap, but it's going to cost you a lot to operate. So you're going to swap those things. The newer the airplane, the smaller it is, the cheaper it is. The bigger it is, the older it is, the more expensive it is. So those two key items, and then the last one is residual value. So I say this because for those of you that are in your finance classes, it's key that you do really good in this. Finance is probably 80% of what we do, right? So once we get into the mission analysis, the financial analysis, now we can start to identify what airplanes work for their mission and their budget. Then I pick up the phone and I call Richard. And I say, Richard, we're going to work. We're going to start making offers. And I'm going to ask him for a contract that's called a letter of intent.
And before we get into the letter of intent, just to piggyback on a few things that Candy said, we have people that'll call us occasionally and we'll ask them about, how do you want to use this asset to accomplish your flight mission? And they'll say, well, I'm going to use it to go maybe 4 or 5 times a year and we're going to fly into Aspen. You don't need to buy an airplane if you're flying 4 or 5 times a year into Aspen. You need to buy a a charter card or a NetJets, FlexJet, something like that, or fly first class. You know, if you don't have the hours to build, to justify the value that you're going to be spending on this asset, don't buy it. There's plenty of other options out there to help you accomplish that mission. We had a major basketball player that we helped to buy an aircraft last year. There's no way he can use the bathroom in that thing. I mean, the guy's 6'5". I mean, and it's a large cabin aircraft, but it's just a fact that, you know, some people are built for certain things. And so you got to kind of account for that in marketing certain aircraft to them as well. So I get a call from someone like Candy and says, hey, I have a guy who's looking to buy this Challenger 605. We've got one lined up. We found it. It's in Singapore and it is Chinese registered. We need to make this happen. So they come to us and we say, okay, we draft up this letter of intent. It's typically a small 1 to 3 page agreement. It says, I want to buy your airplane. So Shannon comes to me and she says, I want to sell this airplane. Jack wants to buy it. And Candy's the broker in between. And they come to me to put together the paperwork that they need to make this happen. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than just going to CarMax and buying a car because there's a lot that goes into it. As you identified, one of the most important things to do early on is building a solid team. So someone who's going to be your technical representative. Usually that's the broker, someone like Candy who has an understanding of how these machines operate to a certain extent. But like you said, you know,
We have
certain runway length requirements or, you know, operating limitations for certain aircraft. Can it even accomplish the mission that they want to? If they need to fly transatlantic flights, does it have the range and capacity to do that? Are there going to be limitations? And so they come to me, I put together the letter of intent, we send it out to the seller, and it's considered. If they say, yeah, this is a good price, this is what I want to do, I want to sell it, they'll sign it, both sides will sign it, then we'll go into the purchase agreement drafting phase. Already at this point, you need to have a plan, which is why it's important to have a team. So let me give you an example. Sales tax. Who knows how much Florida sales tax is? Anyone? 6%, that's right. You know what 6% on $1 million is? How about $50 million? If you could save that 6% instead of paying that directly to the Florida Department of Revenue on day one when you buy your plane and use that money elsewhere on the operational side, on the business side, or even just save the money and go on vacation. People want to save that. Nobody likes to pay taxes. Everybody wants to pay as little amount of money as taxes as possible. So you need to know, where's this aircraft going to be based? Where is it going to be inspected? Are we going to close at the inspection facility? Or are we going to move it somewhere else? You could save a lot of money. For example, New York has no sales tax on aircraft transactions. But if you were to buy a plane in New York, the minute that you fly it to Florida, if it's owned by a Florida business and those members of the business and the president, managers, directors, if they reside in Florida, you just triggered a 6% sales tax the minute that you brought it into Florida if you didn't have a plan for it. And so the ultimate worst case scenario is triggering a tax event where you buy it and then flying it home and triggering another tax event when you bring it home. And then you have a very big, very expensive problem that if you plan for properly in the beginning stages can be completely avoided in most cases.
So you're saying an accountant is a good thing to have too?
An accountant is a very good person to have on your team. And, people like me and Candy, we have contacts in every aspect of the industry. So I know brokers, I know tech reps, I know insurance brokers and accountants, and to help to put together the right team to be able to accomplish the transaction. So we go back and forth on the purchase agreement. Sometimes that's easy and simple, and sometimes it's very difficult. It depends on whether or not the deposit that you put into an escrow account becomes non-refundable on day one from signing the agreement. Sometimes it's refundable up until it gets inspected and the inspection report gets issued and we find out, what's going on with this aircraft. Does it have a history of damage, a history of corrosion? Has it had hard landings? Things that are going to impact the marketability when it comes time to sell it, or make it potentially unsafe for the people who are looking to buy it. These are all things that are considerations when it comes into structuring the deal to make it, everybody's pushing to have everything that they want within the confines of the agreement. And what I mean by that is the seller doesn't want to fix anything that they don't absolutely have to. They want to fix only the airworthy items. The buyer wants them to fix everything that they can. If there's a stain on the carpet, they may want that to happen. And these are competing interests that need to be fleshed out in an agreement so that, sometimes people will come and they'll say, hey, I have this purchase agreement. This plane is amazing. Here it is. I want to sign it. What do you think? And they'll send me something that's 3 pages long. I say, you can't buy a Toyota Corolla with a 3-page long purchase agreement, let alone a $2 million airplane. These things need to have teeth on it. What happens if the agreement doesn't go according to plan? And we need to unring this whole bell and what that looks like.
All right, so let's talk about due diligence. We talked about the LOI. We get a deposit into escrow, usually fully refundable. Now we have Richard working on the purchase agreement. And what I'm doing in the background as an aircraft broker is I'm putting together that team with arm in arm with Richard, right? So we're getting the accountants, we're getting the tax advisors, all of these pieces. We got to understand who's going to take ownership of this airplane. And that ownership entity, we want to make sure that they're ready to take title when we close. But while that's all going on, my team, which consists of, I've got a contracts team, and then I've got a technical team. So I've got 2 guys that are full-time that are both got a long history of aircraft maintenance. So they're going through the maintenance status reports on these airplanes to say, hey, you've got such and such inspections coming up. We might want to incorporate that into the pre-buy inspection. We might say, you know what, nobody's looked at the landing gear in this airplane in a long time. Or, the first owner of the airplane has owned it for 12 years. They've never looked at the landing gear. We might say, you know what, that's a problem area on this airplane. We're going to include that in a pre-buy inspection. So a company like ours, we know the little gotchas depending on the make and model. Because every airplane out there, by the way, every airplane has corrosion. It's just a matter of catching it early. And that's the piece that we're trying to catch. We want to make sure we got an airplane with good bones. You can get a really good deal on an ugly airplane. Have you ever heard of lipstick on a pig? Right? We don't want the pig. I don't care if it's ugly, but it's got to have good bones. That's what I want for my client. So that's the due diligence piece. And we want to make sure we understand the history of the airplane. We're looking into logbooks. It's not my job to do the logbook review, but if I can catch something early, like, hey, did you know the wing was replaced on this airplane back when it was 600 hours old? Sometimes the current owner doesn't even know that. I catch things early and often so we avoid surprises. But we hire a facility. So we're talking about Westar Aviation or Textron Aviation. They have their own facilities that do pre-buy inspections. I go to them and I say, hey, I need a standard pre-buy inspection. Almost every MRO has their own standard pre-buy inspection. And then based on what my tech team finds, we bolt that on and we include it in the purchase agreement as part of our due diligence. This is like if you buy a house and you need to get a home inspection before you buy it. This is that to a much larger and more detailed degree. Once we identify all those things that we want to do, we outline the purchase agreement. Then Richard sends it over to the clients. If everybody agrees, everybody signs it. Then and only then will we move the airplane to the pre-buy facility. Nothing happens until you have a fully executed purchase agreement. And we'll get into the ethics of business aircraft transactions in a little bit. It's an unregulated industry. This is not like, I don't need a realtor license. I don't need an aircraft broker license. So this is where IATA comes in, and we operate at a very high ethical standard. And so this is where we want to do best by the client and making sure that we're doing things ethically. And that's why I say then and only then will we send it. That's an ethical broker. We're not bound by any laws. This is us operating at an ethical standard. So that's where IATA comes in. Is everybody familiar with IATA? Does anybody know what it stands for? Well, if it's right there, you guys should all be answering this question. All right, so they are the organization that really, if you're an IATA member, you are agreeing to operate at a high ethical standard. So I'm gonna have Richard walk through just some of the ownership stuff and what happens towards the end, because this is the piece that's more like buying a business than it is buying a home. And then I will talk a little bit about service after sale.
Sure. So your aircraft is in for inspection, the one that you're looking to buy, and it sometimes goes through and it's beautiful. And there's nothing that they find that needs to be fixed. Never happens. They always find something that needs to be fixed because that's the inspection facility's job, is to look for these types of things. So typically what will happen is you'll get the inspection report, you'll find the full list of things that's wrong with the aircraft, and then determine what do we need to fix and who's supposed to pay for what we need to fix to make this happen. If the aircraft is coming from overseas, like Europe or Asia, we have to consider things like, you guys are probably very familiar with the FAA requirements, but probably less so with Chinese registry or Chinese registered aircraft or IASA registered aircraft. And so to give you an example on something that was kind of a little bit of an issue for us was about 2 years ago, we were working on a transaction where there was an emergency escape hatch handle. IASA said that that handle could be clear as long as it had red LED lights embedded in it. FAA requirements required that handle to be red. Well, is FAA okay with it if we can program those lights to be red, or does the whole hatch have to come off and be replaced with something that's going to be compliant from an FAA standard? If my client's goal is to deregister from Europe right away at closing and transition it so that he could begin operations under the FAA registry right away, that's a big thing that we need to know because the lead time on something like that might be several weeks to get the part, especially with supply chain issues nowadays. If you need a windshield for certain aircraft, good luck. I mean, they're really hard to find for like certain aircraft. But so you get through your inspection, you say, yes, I'm going to buy it. No, I'm not going to buy it, and proceed with closing. Is there financing involved? Has somebody been in touch with the bank to make sure that the money's going to arrive to the escrow account in time? Who's coordinating all of that? And so there's a lot of moving pieces, kind of like a watch, that have to come together all at the same time to make these transactions work. And so we get to the day of closing, everybody, pop the champagne bottle. We did it. Congratulations. This is your airplane now. Well, that's only the first part of it, because as you guys may be aware, or as you'll come to learn in your career, a lot of times the purchase price on an airplane is not the most expensive part about it. It's operating, it's maintaining it, it's conducting the annual inspections and making sure that it's properly crewed and that you have to have pilots on staff. Or are you going to do contract pilots? Is this aircraft going to be used for charter operations? Because if it is, it probably needs certain components to be adjusted or replaced with different ones. The flight data recorder is a big one, in that the requirements for charter operation are typically much higher than they are for Part 91 operation. So when you have this plan in place and then you close, where's the aircraft going from there? Is it flying straight home? Is it going on a mission? Are there tax implications if you use it in the wrong way too quickly? To give you an idea, December for us is crunch time. I mean, from Halloween to New Year's Eve, we are crazy busy because everybody is looking to close their deal before year end. Why? Because you can depreciate an aircraft as a taxable asset, meaning that if your company made $10 million in this year and you buy an $8 million plane, you're not paying taxes on $10 million, you're paying taxes on $2 million because you can depreciate the asset. Now, there's special rules involved in all of that, and it's changing over time, but these are all things that purchasers and sellers, they need to consider. And now with IADA is the International Aircraft Dealers Association. And I'm going to throw some numbers at you guys because I think that for an organization that most of you have never heard of, these numbers might be a little bit surprising. So $11.7 billion in volume last year, over 1,500 aircraft transactions, with over 50% of all transactions in the domestic market, being the United States of America, having an IATA member on one or both sides of the deal. So how do we regulate this industry? How do we make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to and not doing things that are unethical, hiding things in an inspection or making changes to an agreement or trying to slip something in under the radar to pull a fast one on the other side? These are all things that you want to be careful of when you're conducting a transaction like this, but also things that you want to avoid doing yourselves in your professional career, because your reputation in this industry is everything. And if you haven't realized it yet, it's a pretty small pool that we play in. I mean, there's the commercial aspect of it, there's the business aspect of it, but if you get that reputation for being someone who cuts corners or for someone who hides things or is just operating in the gray area of the law, it's very hard and sometimes impossible to wash that stink off of you. And because of how small and close-knit the industry is, everybody knows who those people are. And sometimes I'll get a phone call from someone, they'll say, my charter operator is holding my plane hostage and they won't give it back to me unless I pay them $800,000. And I don't know what to do about it. Then I find out who's on the other side. And then I'm not surprised because it's someone who I've heard of before. And so, these are all things to kind of consider for these transactions.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. Do things the right way. Give people like your all every time. And usually that word is going to get out there. I do have a couple of quick questions. How many of you are in the business program, in the business school here? All right. How many of you are in other, not as a minor, like your major is in another program? All right, great. So we're a nice split here. One thing that, and how many of you are seniors? Okay. That's great. I'd love to see the mix because the people that didn't just raise your hand, I love that you're here and learning about this industry now. For those of you that are seniors, you're probably wondering what's next, what's the job out of here. Every single degree program here has a role in business aviation. And business aviation and working with ethical companies who are with Embry-Riddle or IADA or NAFA, it's aviation. We love our acronyms, right? But this business, the business aviation, you have probably access to most career paths in the business school. Because if you're flying off campus, if you just love aviation, which is why we're all here, right? The business school, there's so much you can do. There's so much opportunity as somebody that works in the business of business aviation. And whether you're into, we talked about this, if you're into fabrics, if you're into design, if you're into aeronautical science, if you're into mechanics, all of it comes back to business. And where I feel like there's nothing wrong with careers as a pilot and flying 7 days on, 7 days off. That it's a great career, great money, right? But business is where you really get to be creative and really shine and showcase your personality and creativity and come up with ideas to go grow your business and have an impact on the company you work for, on the people you work for, and on society. Business is where you have the greatest opportunity to do that. I think that your ability to use the technical knowledge that a lot of you have, in addition to those business theories and strategies, that's where you have the most opportunity. So I just wanted to end with that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some, you probably have some closing remarks on transactions, but Richard's going to talk a little bit about his involvement with IADA Next Gen and some of the scholarships that are available through that. And then we're going to open it up to some questions. Did we answer your question on due diligence? Was there any other questions on the transaction piece specifically? Yes.
So I was going to ask, how do you guys ensure compliance with sanctions, and how do you mitigate your liability?
That's a great question for you.
Very carefully. Sanctions, especially nowadays with Russian sanctions, Venezuela sanctions, it can be very difficult to make sure that you're doing business with somebody that you're allowed to do business with in this day and age. And so we always collect copies of all of their passports to make sure that we can run them through visual compliance searches that gets checked against OFAC sanctions list. We actually use a program called Lexis Diligence, which is through LexisNexis, which is a legal research type platform. And as a part of that, I can put in information for someone. And if there is an obscure newspaper article in Colombia that's not even in English, it'll come up and say, hey, this person was being investigated for money laundering or for drug running or something like that. And then we have to say, hey, even if you can do business with this person, is it worth the bad PR, the optics of, do you want to be on Channel 7 News? CEO of major organization buys Russian oligarch's helicopter to fly to and from their mega yacht. That it's just bad optics. So, but to answer your question very carefully, if there's the good thing about it is the more people that you have involved in the transaction, the more eyes you have looking out for stuff like that. So the escrow agents are going to be looking for stuff like that. They can't send money to people who are prohibited persons. But we can't necessarily just rely on the escrow agents to make sure that they're doing their job correctly. We have to do our own due diligence, our own homework on these people to make sure that we can do this transaction. But great question. So a few more numbers to throw out at you guys too. So IATA, like we said, is one of the largest, it's one of the best international aircraft dealers organizations in the world. They have over 155 members, 60 of which are aircraft dealers, 87 are in the parts and services departments, and which my law firm qualifies as parts and services. OEMs, there's 8 different one of them.
Pretty much all of them.
Yeah, pretty much all of them. Over 100 different countries, and they've been around for over 30 years. And the interesting thing about it is that it's kind of a self-policing industry organization. And so They have grievance processes for people who are not following their guidelines to be able to say, hey, this is not working out. You no longer welcome to be a member of this organization. And they are selective about who they let in and who they don't let in. About only 1 out of every 3 applicants is allowed in that meets the qualifications and the standards that the organization holds for themselves.
And I am an IADA member.
Yeah. Now, on the next gen side of things. So recently, starting back in September, October-ish, we recognized that there was room for developing a committee within the organization of IATA to represent the younger professionals in the organization. So basically anybody who's under 40, who's part of this, can be a part of the next gen committee, which I was appointed as the vice chairman of the committee, which was very great. It's to give the younger professionals a voice within an organization that is, like many historic organizations, has been, led by the previous generations.
The old people. It's
okay.
That was so diplomatic. So old. I was going to get that.
But it's true, though. I mean, we want to have a voice in things because, as you guys are aware, young people are not to be discounted. We have good ideas. We understand technology a lot better than our predecessors, and there's value in that. There's everybody likes to bash on millennials until it's time to convert a PDF to a Word document, and then suddenly we're your new best friends. But but I mean, it's a great organization to be a part of, and the best part about it is that they do kind of help to self-police themselves and to make sure that everybody's kind of operating above board, so that you don't have situations where you get a lemon because you just happen to go to the wrong broker and be led down the wrong path.
Scholarships.
Yes. So IATA Foundation. So they do offer scholarships. My understanding is that they gave over 30,000 in the last year, sometimes as much as 50,000. Anybody who wants information on how to apply for that, I can put you in touch with the right person. I'm not familiar with the qualifications or what they look at to determine who qualifies for the scholarships, but happy to put you in touch with the right person who does know that stuff. They also have IATA U, which offers continuing education courses. And as a part of that, they have online training webinars recorded that, give you everything that you need to know about running an aircraft sales transaction. And it could be a 2.5 hour long video, but you'll get continuing credits for it for your career, and all sorts of really good information on their website.
Yeah, I think I was going to open it up to some questions. I think Dr. Gibson was actually going to queue up a couple, but does anybody have any questions for Richard and I? Yes.
Just a quick question about, you started describing the transaction when the client is there. How do you get the client? Do you recruit the client, or the client come, especially for your company and the norms and the...
So speaking for JetAviva, we handle about 100 transactions a year. And I would say 80% of our business are return clients. We started out in 2006, and our specialty was the owner flown market. And our 2 founders, Cyrus Sagari and Ben Marcus, they worked for Eclipse Aircraft. And a lot of people that were buying these airplanes were wealthy individuals or corporate guys who were pilots, and they were going into their first jet and they need mentorship. So our company was founded helping them buy the jet and then mentor piloting them and whatnot. So a lot of our business is return clients because they've been upgrading over the years. Those guys talk to their buddies, and they're all in the same circles. If you guys haven't heard of YoPro, organizations like that, or these leadership organizations, they all talk to each other and they say, hey, who did you use? So I'd say another 10% of our business is referral. And then we just do a really good job of marketing airplanes when we put them on the market to sell. So anytime somebody calls, we look at that as an opportunity. Look, if we take care of our customer and the buyer, then that buyer becomes our client later. So again, not rocket science. You just got to take really good care of people and let them have a good experience with your company. And those are the return clients.
Yeah, and for what we do, it's very similar to that as well. To give you an idea, last year we closed our 0001 file. It was my boss's first client that he brought in when he first opened the firm over 22 years ago, I think now. And he's been a client with us throughout those years because, like Candy said, every 3 to 5 years, you have people who are looking to trade up. If business is booming, they want something bigger, something faster, something better, newer, or business isn't doing so good, but they've got that itch now that they don't want to go back to commercial aviation, flying commercially, or also they just have gotten used to having an airplane. And so even if business is hard, they may need to sell the airplane, but they may be buying something that's a little bit more cost effective on the operating side, maybe something a little bit more cost effective on the purchase price side, and they can get a large amount of money for their current aircraft. So if you do a good job, if you keep your clients happy, they will come back to you year after year. And I can't tell you how many of our clients do that, but it's a very good portion of it. A lot of our business also comes from the brokers, like Candy. It says, hey, I've got a guy, he's never owned an airplane before. He has no idea what he's doing. He needs a structure that's going to not shoot himself in the foot. And so they'll send it to us and we'll do a good job on it.
It's important for, again, ethical side. Us as a IADA certified broker, we tell our clients we do not provide tax or legal advice. We're not attorneys and we're not CPAs. We know a lot of good questions to ask, but we always point them to the professional for that. So that referral source back and forth, that works both ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question. One day I want to own my own private jet. I'm going to own a 727. And in a lot of ways, as you can see, government regulations have really gone towards old jets having touch kits. And the cost that goes into that obviously is astronomical. Let's say, at unlimited money, this wouldn't really be a question. But in the case that you want to be a responsible owner and you want to own something that's a little bit older, have you seen the maintenance and because like you said, the initial cost to buy a 727 usually is relatively low for aircraft. Right. It's like $7-8 million. After obviously you own the jet, you obviously have like engine programs like MSP Gold or things like that. But over time, have you seen that like as a sustainable option for people that in some ways want to like save money on the upfront cost, but then mechanically owning a jet like that is going to be pretty expensive? You're speaking my language. This stuff like really excites me. Like you want this airplane, but you've got this thing that could be coming, the regulations and whatnot. I'll give you a couple examples. Gulfstream had the G2 and the G3 out there. They ran Rolls-Royce engines on them, but they're Tay and Spey engines. The Spey engines on the G2 and the G3 were very noisy. And in 2020, there was a ban basically on engines that were producing a decimal level, I forget what it was, and they were banned. So several years prior to that, there was a company that came out with HUD kits for the Spey engines. Now, at some point, like they were selling a lot of those because people had just updated their interiors, the avionics, they had dumped millions of dollars into these jets that they loved. But I would say by and large, all of those airplanes now are being retired out of the country or parted out. Then you've got companies, so like the Beechjet 400A, those ones had, this is where I get to showcase my knowledge a little bit. Those had JT-15s on it, Pratt & Whitney engines. And those
those are relatively cheap engines, but they're noisy, they burn a lot of gas. And so Nextant aircraft came out and they put Williams engines on those. And so in the case of the 727, it's hard to say what companies might come out with an STC that maybe they swap the engines that are quieter or burn more efficiently to meet the government regulations, but it's going to be based on demand, right? You've got to have probably 50 of your friends that want to do the same thing for it to make sense for somebody to invest into that STC. Or if you have unlimited cash, like you can invest in that STC and then sell it to other people. A piece of paper that's approved by the FAA, as it turns out, you may not even have to do anything to the airplane. Citation's a great example. The Excel has a gross weight increase mod. You don't have to do a thing to the airplane. And that piece of paper costs 30 grand. So that's an STC. The answer is there's always solutions, but if the company that's developing the STC doesn't have enough demand, then you may not be able to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I like that one. All right.
So thinking back to your academic experience, your time in college, right? Whether it was here or somewhere else, was there a particular experience, course, faculty that really helped prepare you for your career? Or maybe conversely, a course that in retrospect now, given what you do, boy, you would encourage everyone else to pay a little more attention in that particular course. So either way, you know, what really helped prepare you, or do you wish you would have prepared more while you were here?
Yeah. 3 things for me, and then I'm sure Richard has his own. I wish I would have paid more attention in finance classes. I just told Dr. Gibson earlier, there's parts of my job that I despise. I hate doing expense reports. I hate anything to do with like financial, like all of that stuff. It does not interest me. The reality is it's a very critical piece of financial analysis for our customers and whatnot. It's not, and it just never interested me. But in hindsight, I wish that I would have paid more attention or taken more classes in finance, because that also would have helped me in my personal life and my own investments. I probably would have been much further ahead in my personal retirement, investments, and things like that had I paid more attention to it, but I didn't have an interest in it. 2 other things. One is I had a really good professor that was very impactful, John Rollins, who was here many moons ago, and he just took the time to really spend with me and mentor me, and that was very critical to have. It doesn't have to be a lot of faculty, but if you can find a professor that really sees something in you, take advantage of that. And then the last thing is find good mentors in your life. We all need mentors. We all need coaches. The best CEOs in the world have business coaches. Somebody once told me, if you had the opportunity to learn how to golf from Tiger Woods or Tiger Woods' coach, who should you go to? The answer is Tiger Woods' coach, right? And so we all have that special somebody behind us that's helping us, guide us, give us unbiased opinions, and guide us through life, and find those people. It doesn't have to be a lot. 1 or 2 will really do it, but having good mentors is another thing.
So for me, I wish I would have taken a tax law class in law school. I think that would have been very helpful. I had friends who were doing it, and I just said, tax law, that sounds terrible. I'm never going to be doing anything with taxes. I took guardianship law instead, and I thought that would be
That doesn't sound
much
better.
No, it was terrible too. But the tax law would have been helpful to know, but really you'll come to learn that a lot of what you learn in school is very important, but it's also the relationships that you build with the people that you're surrounding yourself with in school because you never know, the person sitting next to you in this meeting hall might be, you know, the head of a major maintenance company that you need a favor from, you know, because
I've called in those favors a lot.
yeah. And so maintaining your positive reputation and always staying ethically above board and just never having yourself get covered in that mud is worth its weight in gold. But like Candy said, I got lucky getting into this industry. I happened to be introduced to the right person at the right time in my career to make it happen. But you got to work your ass off to stay here because it's very competitive, as I'm sure you guys have already learned. But it's a very competitive but a very fun industry. And then I have one funny story, and then I'll release the microphone to somebody else. But the Tiger Woods comment. So when I decided that I was going to law school in high school, my grandfather went out and bought me a set of golf clubs because he said, hey, you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to need to learn how to golf. So it's Christmas morning on maybe, gosh, 20 years ago now. And I'm hitting golf balls into a lake behind my grandfather's house. And it was in West Palm Beach, Florida, which was very hot for Christmas that time of year. And I'm swinging and I swing the golf club and my hands were sweaty and the club swung out of my grip like a helicopter right into the middle of the lake and it sank to the bottom. And my whole family is sitting behind me just laughing hysterically. My grandfather says, hey, maybe you need to learn how to play tennis or smoke cigars or something else because golf is not going to be your thing. But you'd be surprised that, you know, on the golf course, on the tennis course, you know, whoever you're playing with might be somebody who's your next big client, your next big industry contact, your friend. And so really it's paying attention to the social aspect of things can be immensely beneficial in your career development. So.
More questions?
Any more questions?
Okay.
What's up?
You couldn't stress enough how important reputation is between clients and broker for the company. From a new company standpoint, from a new seller standpoint, new broker standpoint, how do you build that trust? Where it's like non-existent before, how do you build it initially?
Sure. So you never want to overpromise and underdeliver. If you think you're going to get it by Wednesday, tell them you think you'll get it by Friday. And then that way, when you get it on Wednesday, you look better for hustling. But really, it's just by the quality of your work product. You get that first one in, like Candy said, they tell their friends, and it just is a chain reaction. For me, I've been practicing law for about 10 years now. I've been in aviation for the last 6.5, and my career is just finally starting to get to the point where I remember going to industry events and having to really hustle and try and sell myself. And I remember meeting people 3, 4, 5 times, and I would say, oh, it's great to see you again. And they'd say, oh, nice to meet you. And just like they didn't remember that they had met me the year before. And now after I've been doing it for a few years, you kind of got to stick with it. You got to just kind of grin and bear it. And it's never a great feeling when somebody doesn't remember you when you've had a conversation with them in the past. But slowly over time, your reputation becomes more and more apparent. You get started, they start asking you to be a presenter at stuff like this. And so it grows and it builds off of it, and just really just doing the best job that you possibly can for each client, so that they come back and so that they tell other people that you did a great job for them is really what I would say is the best way to do it.
I think the number one key for a new business is the people. It's always the people. You could be selling widgets, you could be It's all about the people and being able to connect and being genuine. The other thing that you all, this is so critical in business, be a good listener. Above all, don't try to showcase how smart you are. That will come through organically. The best thing you can do in business, especially a new business, is be a good listener. Because you're not offering a product, you're not offering a service, you're offering a solution to something, right? And so in order to do that, you have to be a good listener. And so having a good character, hiring the right people, and then being a good listener, that's going to get you off the ground more than anything. Yeah.
Good leading. So a question much earlier in the talk, when you were at the point of discussing your relationship as your relationship with the technical people, the inspectors. You are the director of sales. I missed the first half of the talk, but I imagine you have salespeople under you. Now, where do you see the pitfalls of that relationship between the more front end salesperson or one step below you, and then those technicians that they might not have as strong a relationship as you do to bring?
Yeah, this is an evolution that I'm going through myself right now. So I'm a control freak. I imagine most of the people that go to this university are probably are control freaks. They like to be in control of their lives. It's hard for me to let go things that I know that I do really well, right? But if you don't trust the right people, you gotta have the right people with the right character, right? If there's a real drive to get it right, attention to detail, then you gotta let your people and you gotta delegate and let them do those things. It's not to say I know more than them. I could probably bring value if I stayed involved in those conversations. But is it making me more efficient or the company more efficient? Is it making a difference to our bottom line? Probably not. So again, the key is the right people. If you don't have the right people, then you're not going to have good success with that. If you have the right person with drive and picks things up quickly, then it can work very well. And you can do 3 times more business than you can do on your own. But you have to have the right people.
And to piggyback off that a little bit, you have to be willing to allow your people to make mistakes because they're going to, and it's going to happen. And the trick is to give them enough room, enough rope to be able to not hang themselves with it. And so in a more supervisory capacity, your goal is to kind of oversee things, but if they don't make mistakes, they're never going to learn. If you do it for them every time, they're never going to learn. And so finding the right team that you can trust enough to let go of the wheel just enough for them to learn and make mistakes, which causes them to you remember the mistakes that you made way more than all the times you got it right. And so at this part of our career, it's a little bit hard, even for myself, to let go of some of that control. But you have to. It's the only way to grow as an organization and for your staff to grow so that, eventually they don't need to rely on you as much as they did when they first started.
So at this juncture, we're going to conclude the webinar portion of this. So thank you. Yes, it's nice.
Really sorry about that.
Yeah,
I want to say thank you for everyone for being here, but both Candy and Richard are willing to sit here and answer your questions ongoing, but I just want to have business cards as well. They have business cards. I'll encourage you to check out the IADA website to apply for the IADA scholarships, which are out there and important. And just to reiterate what a small world it is, what Candy didn't say is, remember Lucina from yesterday? She worked for Lou.
He was my boss.
They all work together. It's such a small world, and that's how you grow in this industry and in your career. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us. Thank you guys.